Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today at Publicis Commerce on the I Could Buy That series. We want to keep this concise, so let me remind you of the rules of the game before we get into it. First, we invite a credible guest to share a thought that will expand how we look at the world of commerce. This month we have Lex Bradshaw-Zanger, CMO of L'Oreal UK and Ireland. Second, we asked them to open with their thesis in one short sentence to set the stage. Chances are this is something that's fresh that requires a bit of explaining to better understand. So finally, we dive in deeper, looking at 3 key data points to back up that thesis, with some great stories to tie it all up and leave you with enough to think about and hopefully change the way you look at our industry. So first off, I want to thank Lex from L'Oreal for joining us. He not only being a good client, he's a good friend. So Lex, please, for our audience, if you could tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, Ali. Thanks very much. Thanks, first of all, for inviting me and having me part of this session. Great to be with you. And as you said, great to see you again, because Ali, you and I are old colleagues, and your work is esteemed, in my opinion. So yes, a little bit about me. I think I probably wrapped my career up into 2 big segments with a bit of a pivot in the middle. And I spent the first almost 10 years of my career in the agency world, always in a bit of a digital transformation role, pure play digital agencies, what we might call Madison Avenue kind of network agencies, always trying to transform both the clients and the business model. And that's where you and I met at Leo Burnett. I then spent a bit of time with Facebook, just when Facebook was IPOing, just when Facebook was trying to figure out that it wasn't just a social community, but really a media partner. And so that was really great and exciting, really thinking about how Facebook works across the whole funnel. And then I moved client side. So before L'Oreal, I was with McDonald's at a European level in a digital strategy role. And this is my second role at L'Oreal, so I'm coming up on 4.5 years. I joined actually as the CMO or the CDMO, so our digital and marketing officer roles are mixed up. First for the Middle East and Africa zone, so big developing markets, lots and lots of geography to cover, lots of exciting triple-digit growth, even quadruple-digit growth in the e-commerce business. And now since September 2019, I'm the CMO for the UK and Ireland. So clearly arriving in 2019 is an interesting time, because just managed to get settled and figure out the way to the office, and then we've been basically locked up at home since then. But it's been a transformational year for everything digital transformation, but e-commerce in particular. And we've had some amazing results. We grew our business by an enormous amount, kind of over 60%, just our e-commerce business in 2020. So amazing times. And my role today covers all aspects of digital transformation. So whether it's the media mix, whether it's e-commerce acceleration, whether it's what we're doing with data and data science, consumer insights, or all these different pieces. But a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you. So actually, to that point, your CEO actually last year said e-commerce is the name of the game. Today, I think L'Oreal is a leader in e-commerce, considering the revenue that comes from e-commerce specifically. It's interesting that the digital function and marketing function work with one another. Building on that, I'm assuming commerce measurement is a major focus for you. Could you give us a bit of an idea in terms of like your experience with commerce measurement, where you've seen it go, how you feel about it?
Yeah, so I mean, I probably say that I've got a lot of experience in commerce measurement, and then probably not enough experience in commerce measurement, because it's a space that's moving exceedingly fast. I think probably the best way to look at it is really to think about what's happened over the last sort of 12, 15 months. It's really been this movement to sort of, how do we move our media mix? How do we move media down the funnel? And that is a move towards return on investment, return on ad spend, and a lot about performance media and performance formats. So there's been a lot of that. But then it's also about understanding what's happening on the platforms themselves, understanding what's happening at the pointed end of the spear in terms of, I don't know, glance views on Amazon, or promotions and promotion activation and price elasticity. So there's a lot going on, but I would say this is a space that's exploding, and there's a lot more to do.
Yeah, so you're essentially speaking about 2 very different poles and different dynamics. So I want to ask you, what's the idea that you want our listeners to buy into?
Thanks. So you've set me up well for that. I think that the core idea is that if you want to win in commerce, you've got to measure it, but you've got to measure it completely. It's not about just ROAS and just the bottom of the funnel. It's about the whole funnel, top to bottom. It's about traditional brand metrics, reach metrics, and about what's happening at the pointed end of the spear, where the sales taking place. So it's really about understanding the whole picture. And we'll get onto it, but that's a balance of art and science, and some more fundamentals of marketing, as well as what's happening today.
So you spoke about the last few months, maybe the last year plus, that's really shifted things. Is there a moment of inflection that really got you thinking like, hey, commerce is much more than ROAS. We've got to look at it completely, to use your words. Was there a moment, was there an impetus that led to this?
I think it's not an impetus as such. I think it's just the natural evolution of things. As a manufacturer rather than a retailer, although we do operate retail sites. In the UK, of our 40 brands, we have about 12 that are direct to consumer. You think top of the funnel down. So you're very brand driven, very reach driven, creating demand at the point of sale. As we moved into lockdown last year and everything was focused on e-commerce, we suddenly started shifting media money to performance media bottom of the funnel, whether that's direct or indirect with our retail customers. As you start to do that, as you shift and accumulate the bottom of the funnel, obviously you take up the available inventory, you see your ROAS, you see how the conversion, and you see it evolve over time. It goes up and then it plateaus and maybe it goes down. So what does that mean? It means you've built up and you've used the inventory that's available, and then you have to start working way up the funnel. You've got to create more demand. So I think it's a natural evolution of things. It's really this thing to say, okay, if I want to create more demand at the bottom of the funnel, I need to work on consideration, I need to work on consumer engagement. And then when that starts to run out a little bit, just a leaky bucket, I need to create more reach and more demand at the top of the funnel. So it's not a penny drop moment. It's just an evolution as the consumer evolves and as you move more transactions down that channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to your point about the thinking completely, the key components around your argument, like what are you thinking? Like what drives that line of thinking?
So I think the first point is brand. I'm a big believer in the fundamentals of marketing, and some of that's reach and frequency and media, but some of that's brand as well, and brand metrics and really understanding. And so brand has an impact in everything that we do. Brand awareness is really, really critical. And we've seen that during lockdown. We've seen big brands really growing well. So we have the biggest beauty brand in the world, L'Oreal Paris. We have the biggest makeup brand in the world, Maybelline New York. So we've seen that big brands are more successful than smaller kind of attacking brands because people are going back to what they know, going back to trust. So brand plays a key role in that. But obviously we don't measure brand in the same the same way we measure return on ad spend and conversion against the specific channel. So understanding that brand plays a part, understand that multiple channels play a role in e-commerce, and that it's not just a question of sitting in an individual silo of performance media and conversion on a platform.
Okay. So I get that as a contribution. Do you have any hacks to getting that? Other than just brand affinity, like how do you count its contribution to e-commerce?
So I think it's a good question. So there's hacks, and how do you do it, or how do you measure it? So maybe let's talk about hacks to start with. I think sometimes in the rush to performance media and the rush to conversion, we've forgotten about good brand communication. That's understanding the brand DNA, but it's also the brand codes, making sure we execute against brand codes at every point, at every contact point with the consumer, and making sure you rebuild that. Brand is what holds together a beautiful brand awareness piece with a piece of performance communication. So I think that's the first piece. I don't know if it's a hack or if it's just good marketing, but understanding your brand and making sure you deliver on it across the board. And then on the flip side of that, I would say, that there is the opportunity now in most media, if not all, to make everything almost clickable, almost if I want to buy it now. So you can have a performance piece that is 20% off, buy this now, but you can also have a piece of brand awareness about a product, about the brand, that still has the ability to click on a link. Now that's a nuance today. In the Facebook newsfeed, for example, we can put a piece of brand communication or top of the funnel product communication and really drive it with a reach objective, but we can still have a clickable link to go and buy it if you want. And that's almost possible on TV now, with URLs and with links. You can make the TV direct response and call to action as well. So I think there's a point about execution, both in terms of the content and in the format. And then you asked about how we measure it. Obviously, measurement is harder. It's easy when everything's online, but we can't think about traditional media and connect them directly. This is all about last click attribution, multi-touch, and how all the pieces fit together. I think what's important is to keep following brand metrics to understand at least what the consumer thinks about the brand. And then as we go forward, to start to build bridges between these data points. But that's clearly harder, and that needs a lot of IT and data infrastructure that isn't easy for all advertisers.
Yeah. I mean, the brand strategist in me is super happy to hear you say this, to see that we have a place in commerce. And we can go on for that for hours. And I leave that to our after hours sessions. But you spoke about these other data points, right? So you spoke about, I'm assuming, especially L'Oreal is very data rich. What do you do with all of it? Well, what is the first step? Like to already have it, first, let me tell you, you're ahead of the game. But what next? What happens after that?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. We're very data rich. That means we have a lot of data. The question is how we're able to use it and how we're able to action it. So today, what we're good at is looking at the data in each of its native ecosystems. I can look at my Amazon data. I can look at my Google data. I can look at my Facebook data. I can look at my media campaigns overall. I can start to measure ROAS, and I can think about ROI overall. What's harder is bringing all those data points together. Particularly Amazon is a great example because Amazon is both a media platform, a publisher, but also a commerce platform. And linking those two together is really, really interesting. But it's not a direct affinity because we know that Amazon Media drives off-platform sales, and we know that brand media off Amazon also drives Amazon sales. So it's about building the bridges between those data points, understanding in isolation what they mean and how we optimize, and then together what the bigger picture is. But I don't think the bigger picture is purely data driven, and that's where there's this balance of art and science to understand how it all comes together.
Mm-hmm. So you spoke about this balance of art and science earlier on in our conversation, and I know as we prepped for this session, what advances have you made in regards to identifying what is art, what is science, what is relevant, and bringing them together to hopefully reach balance?
If I told you that, I'd be giving away the secret sauce, and I don't even work at McDonald's anymore. But no, I mean, I don't think there's a formula or an algorithm that really puts it together. We've got lots of teams working on that in different ways. Part of it, sure, is data driven, and how do you connect the dots between your different data lakes, between your different data ecosystems, and start to build that. But it's never, or at least not for the moment, it's not a pure algorithm. There is a lot of marketing experience, and experience leads to instinct to be able to make the right decisions. You've got to inject brand performance in different areas, how all those pieces fit together, and what the output is. I'd love to be able to tell you that we had a system that measures everything, puts it all together, weights it, coefficients, and gives you an output. Yeah, that sounds a little bit like MMM, but that doesn't work perfectly. That's not a completely pure science. So I think this balance of art and science is experience in marketing, understanding the channels, understanding the ecosystems today, and how all that fits together. I think that's where the Western world and China are quite different. In China, the ecosystems are very vertical. You think about the Tencent ecosystem, you think about the Ali ecosystem. They have everything from media, even broad scale media like TV, it's all very addressable, so all very trackable at the top, through social engagement, through commerce, and then they even do logistics and payment. So it's super easy for them to drive a consumer all the way through the funnel and to track them from point A to point B to point C. Our Western ecosystems are much more horizontal. You've got the media, entertainment kind of ecosystems, be they Facebook, Google, YouTube. You've got commerce with Amazon, and then you've got other pieces. The payment is even separate. So that's where it's harder. There's friction points between those ecosystems, and it's harder to join the dots. That's where it's really interesting to see what Amazon's doing and how they're evolving. With Prime Video, if they can get a handle on addressable TV, then suddenly they're working their way up the funnel. If you think about their Instagram copy Spark in the US, they're working their way up the funnel to connect that. If you think about their DSP acquisition with Seismic, they're working their way up the funnel. So there's some exciting things happening, but we're not in the same place as China today.
Perfect. It's good that the playbook is out there. So I want to tie this all together. I want to make sure I got what you're saying right. First off, what you're saying is if you want to win commerce, you've got to measure it. And if you want to measure it completely, you have to think of it as a whole. And basically what's behind that is that brand is a huge contributor to sales. Don't forget about that. Make sure to not only invest in it, but measure it. Second off is you need to harness all these commerce data points, right, as best as you can. And this comes ultimately in the third point, which is reaching this balance of marketing art and science, be it the hard facts as well as technique and experience, as you mentioned before. So thank you for that. So now that you're going to be putting this out into the market, this line of thinking, what would your haters say? What would the naysayers say after hearing this hypothesis on your behalf?
What would the haters say? Well, the haters would say that it's a 50,000-foot view, and that things are very different when you're in the details. And they're probably right because I've made a simplification of the whole world and ecosystem that we live in. But when you're right in at the front end as a seller on Amazon, running your products, running Amazon Media, then it's all very simple and it's all very clear. So I think there is, maybe it's not a hate to say, but it's the vantage point. I'm looking at it at a very big picture point of view. And people in specific areas will have their own view of their ecosystem from where they sit. So I think that's probably one piece. I think potentially there is a desire that MMM, ROAS, ROI guide us forward and help us make decisions, and we're working for that. The WFA have a global project called Origin, which is cross-media measurement, and we're part of that as L'Oreal sponsoring that. that's really important because that will take us closer to this ecosystem where we can really measure things. So I think the haters will say that some things are possible today, that we're closer than maybe I say we are, but maybe not as broad or a bigger picture view as I might have.
Let's forget the haters for a second. Let's talk about, so I'm on board with this thinking. What does your ideal state look like? What does the world look like when everyone's brought up this thinking, when the ecosystem is that much stronger? Paint us a picture of what this thinking leads to.
I think that the easiest way to think about this is to sort of think about something concrete that we all talk about in the press, which is Amazon. Because then we start to talk about physical retail and online retail, and you think about the Amazon Go stores that identify you as a consumer when you walk through the door. Now, there are some privacy issues around that, and clearly that sort of thing is easier in China than it is in Europe or in the UK. But there's something intrinsically exciting about saying, I can identify a consumer when they walk into the store, when they walk through the door versus when they're at the register and they have to put out their loyalty card or identify themselves. There's something there that completely changes the ecosystem, because whether that's Google, whether that's Facebook, whether that's Amazon, suddenly I can start to tie my purchases to my interests, to my browsing, to my activity. So there is a piece to say that the world understands everything about everyone, but then there's a privacy component to that. And so I think it's how do we get to that in a privacy safe way? That's probably the future, but there's a lot of challenges between now and then.
Okay. Speaking about the challenges between now and then, for those of us who bought your hypothesis and it was the way forward that you're crafting, what's the first step? What's next? What do we do to get going?
So I think there are a bunch of things, but I think it is really understanding the environment in which we operate. And so that's an understanding of the fundamentals of marketing, as well as what the ecosystem that we work in today and how it works and how the consumer interacts with it. You know, I love to talk about fundamentals, and for me, there are two core fundamentals. One is kind of marketing, media, and brand, and the other one is understanding the consumer. If you can really get a grasp of those, then you can master anything. You know, if you understand what the consumer wants, you really know what your brand positioning is, and then you remember what reach and frequency means in media. And then on the flip side, you understand how an e-commerce platform works, whether somebody's out trying to buy something that they're just replenishing and they know what it is, or whether they're on a shopping discovery trip. If you start to understand those pieces, then as marketers, we can really master the whole ecosystem and figure out how to pull all the pieces together.
So a little bit of understanding will just get us that much closer, right? The better informed we are, the closer we get. All right. Well, as just the last thing, first, thank you for sharing your thinking with us. I'd like to give you the opportunity, if you had one chance to speak to the entire market amongst all our peers, all our competitors, whatever it may be, there's one call out to the market. What would it be to get people behind your line of thinking?
My goodness, one call out to the whole market. Yeah. I'm gonna be rude and take two. I think one, don't forget brand fundamentals. Going back to brand fundamentals is really, really critical, and sometimes we're losing that in this rush to performance. And then the second one is that the future isn't e-commerce or the high street; it's a combination of both. We used to call that omni-channel or online plus offline. I think there's probably a new term for that. We don't quite know what it is, but when you look at the UK with what's happening in the high street, you've got ASOS buying Topshop, you've got Boohoo buying Debenhams, or at least buying the brands and the audiences and not buying the stores. There's a lot of change happening. So I'd say the call out to the market is think about what the future looks like. It's not online or offline, it's something in between, and we've really got to define that.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I'm really happy we're recording these sessions, because now I can take that and then use it at dinner parties and sound extremely brilliant. So thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Anyways, thank you, Lex. Thank you for joining us today. And to everyone who's listening or watching, thanks for doing so. We hope that it has got you thinking, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So drop us an email. Join us again next month for another great guest who will hopefully leave you thinking, I could buy that.